For every 63 paise a woman earns in India, a man will earn the equivalent of 1 rupee.
We have fostered a society. It is fine to not be equal.
What we need to do is ensure that every single woman's contribution actually counts. And how can we do that? By helping them get on to the formal economy.
Vinita, we talk so much about women's empowerment in India, yet something like marital rape is not even recognized legally. So how can we talk about women's empowerment?
That's a very big question.
India, which is one of the fastest growing economies, over half of the population cannot even get like a 10,000 rupee loan.
That's not the India that we want to build. That's not the India we aspire to. That's not the India that is the modern India.
Where do you see India in the next 20 years?
I hate to say this. I believe.
Hi guys, welcome to Kindness with Amy. I am so excited about today's episode. I'm joined by two very dynamic women, and today we are going to be delving into some topics that are very close to my heart in relation to India's disparity. I'm joined by Miss Vinita Bali, who is an incredible business leader. She is ex-CEO of Britannia. She has been in senior leadership positions in companies like Cadbury and Coca-Cola and many other global organizations, as well as being known for her social impact work. I'm also joined by Smita Ram, who is the co-founder of 𝗗𝗜𝗦𝗣𝗔𝗥𝗜𝗧𝗬, which is an incredible organization, also very close to my heart, who are doing amazing work in creating financial inclusivity within India. So welcome, ladies. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you.
So, Smita, I was thinking that in India, which is one of the fastest growing economies, I was reading that over half of the population cannot even get like a 10,000 rupee loan. Why is this?
The way I see it, Amy, economic growth is not always inclusive growth, right? And that's exactly what has happened in India. If you look at the formal credit system, the way it has been designed is it's skewed. It's skewed towards the urban, it's skewed towards salaried people. But if you look at a majority of our rural population, they work in the informal economy. So when they end up going to a bank, nobody recognizes them. They don't exist. They don't have the means to actually do a credit underwriting for them. They're not able to look at credit worthiness from a different angle. So they look at financial transactions and data around it as the only way in which they can decide whether or not somebody is eligible for credit. But they don't look at other sources of information through which this decision can actually be made. And every single thing, right from the opening hours of the bank to their policies, nothing is actually pro the people that they are meant to serve. So unless somebody thinks of why these systems were designed this way and think about a way to change it, this will not really change. That's the really sad part. And I think we need to really look at alternate ways of doing this. Only then growth can actually be inclusive. Sadly, we're just looking at growth in one side of things and not really in a very holistic way.
Absolutely. And it's shocking for me because I feel like the farmers and rural India, this is the backbone of this country, right? And the fact that a farmer, if he wants to like get a loan for like 10,000 rupees is like such a small amount of money for us, right? And the fact that they cannot get a loan, it's just shocking for me that that's even the case, that we have a system that doesn't serve the people who need it most.
Absolutely. So think about it, right? When are the farmers most busy? The farmers are busy during the day, and that is when the banks are open, and they're expected to travel miles to even reach a bank. And when they go there, they either realize that the printer is not working. We have had instances where women have gone, spent half a day traveling to the bank to get their passbooks updated, only to be told that the printers are not working. And this has happened for so many days consistently that hey, I don't even know what my bank balance is, what is the amount lying in my bank account. And that is the kind of we're not even talking about loans worth tens and lakhs of rupees. We're talking about a very simple banking transaction. And on one hand, we're making these digital leaps, but on the other hand, something as basic as this is still something that people need to fight for.
Absolutely, absolutely. And Vinita, I was reading that for every 63 paise that a woman earns in India, a man will earn the equivalent of 1 rupee. That's today in India. So why is it that we still have this gap between men and women?
That's a very big question, Amy. And I think it delves into so many areas. It's the social fabric that we live with. It is the expectation that women will do certain kinds of work which men will not. They're earning 63 paise for every rupee primarily because they are doing the low end but backbreaking and hard work, the hard work. Take the example of agriculture. There are so many tries, so many times all of us are driving, and then we see these women bent over. They are either de-weeding or planting or doing something which is really, really hard labor. Even Manrega gives them wages which are less than wages for a skilled worker. And let me tell you, planting those rice plants in a straight line is not an unskilled job. It's a very skilled job, but it's not recognized as such. What do the men do? They drive the tractors, they go and harvest, then they take all of that to the mandi to sell it. So, unfortunately, I've just taken the example of agriculture, but you can extrapolate it to anything else. Uh, Smita and I live in Bangalore. The streets of Bangalore are cleaned every day by women who are called these purva karmikas. They are bending over to keep our streets cleaned. And if you look at the emoluments they get, those are pathetic. Take the ASHA workers. The entire healthcare system in rural India depends on delivery by these ASHA workers, who are not even full-term employees. They are, they're called accredited social health activists. And their base salary is so pathetically low, 4,000 or 4,500, something like that.
A
And then,
month.
yes. And then for every vaccination I get another 600 and so on. So if I'm working 12 to 14 hours a day, the best that I could hope to get is probably 12 to 15,000 rupees. I am slogging all day as an ASHA worker, and that's what I get at the end. And by the way, the entire delivery of healthcare in rural India is dependent on these ASHA workers. So we've got inequity, which is endemic to our social fabric, our economic fabric, our cultural fabric. And therefore, the 63 paise to 1 rupee is the result of, not the reason for.
So, how do we change that? Because obviously it's a very deeply rooted issue and very complex issue as well. But I mean, there has to be something that needs to shift and start shifting for these factors to change.
Amy, for anything to change, you have to first accept the need to change it. If we are in denial, if we believe it is not important, if we have no conviction around it, then it's highly unlikely that something will change. If we believe that equity and fairness are the two basic principles we have to follow, then the solutions are not that tough. I believe I hate to say this, I believe we just don't care, or not enough of us care enough to change it. Part of this has to be political will. Part of this has to be collaboration between the social sector and the government, between the social sector, the government, and the private sector. There has to be a universally accepted credo which says that we treat all people fairly and equitably. And that has to be galvanized, that has to be recognized. You can see pockets of change. You can see pockets where NGOs are working. You can see pockets. where something different has happened. For example, the entire Seva organization, which was built by 𝗜𝗚𝗏𝗧𝗬, was on the basis of the fact that women are working really hard and they have no social security net at the end of it. So there are pockets, but those are largely development sector organizations, etc. This is something that I believe is the responsibility of, the political system and leadership coming from the private sector, the public sector, um, to change that which is wrong, in my view.
Absolutely. But I think you're right, the point you made about people not caring. I think ultimately that's what it is. And we see that across the board in so many different things. This was really highlighted to me the other day. I was at a party, I was playing 𝗜𝗏𝗦𝗀 for the first time. And anyway, so I was about to start playing, and then they were asking, "What are you doing tomorrow?" And I'm like, "Oh, I'm going for a beach cleanup." And the guy said to me, "What's the point? फिर से गंदा हो जाएगा." I'm like, that is the problem. This attitude of like, फिर से हो जाएगा, हाँ, but अगर कोई कुछ करेगा नहीं, then how will anything ever change? Right? So, I was reading that in India, over 20 crore people go hungry every single day. Every single day. And then we're also spending more on defense than we're spending on education and healthcare combined. So I just don't understand, like, where are our priorities when we have such a serious issue literally right in front of us? Why is the government not doing more to put money where it needs to go? Clearly, we have such a serious issue. We have over a third of the world's poorest people live in India. And also the most illiterate, 19% of our population is illiterate, yet we're diverting money to defense when we should be putting larger funds towards educating our people and teaching our people the things that they need to have, giving them the basics that they need to have, obviously. Why do you think that funds are going where they're going instead of where they should be going?
I think it's really a question of what do you prioritize. If I were to look at, the rhetoric that, let's say, we are the fastest growing economy in the world, and you say, okay, true. But then let's strip it down, let's disaggregate it, let's try and understand what that means. And the way I would think about it is that, when you are a population of 1.4 billion people, you better be the fourth largest economy in the world. However, when you look at GDP per capita, where does India go? India drops to 136th position. Okay, from the fourth largest economy in the world, which is about $4 trillion. And by the way, if you have 1.4 billion people, it's not so difficult to become the fourth largest economy in the world, which is what we've become. Our GDP per capita is still about $2,400. We have not revised key numbers like, the census has been inordinately delayed. We are guessing that this is what our population is. The last census was done in 2011. Right. So we're looking at a GDP per capita of 2,400, number 136 in the world. By Niti Aayog's own admission in a report that was recently published, where they say that extreme poverty has come down from 29% to 10% in the last 10 years. And I'm saying 10% of 100 or 11%. 11% of 1.4 billion people is still 155 million people. The fact that we have to give free ration to 800 million people under the PDS scheme tells us something, doesn't it? The fact that we don't have enough employment, for the aspirations that have been created around a modern developing India. The fact that we're not able to, give even graduates who are graduating from IIMs and IITs enough jobs. We're creating so many people with degrees, but we're not creating enough people with the right skills and knowledge to make them employable. So I think there's got to be some very deep thinking. What I've just rattled off is is what we read every day. So it's out there for everybody to see. Why aren't we taking cognizance of this? And why aren't we putting, as you said, putting our money where our mouth is, which is, how do you generate employment? How do you create a nation of people, who are not just aspiring towards growth and better lives, but also living those better lives and that growth? Do I want to get a degree and then spend my life zooming around on a two-wheeler giving you groceries in 10 minutes? That's not the India that we want to build. That's not the India we aspire to. That's not the India that is the modern India. The modern India has to work with technology. It has to be inclusive. It has to be, environmentally responsible. It has to have accountability. It has to have good governance. And then you say, where are we along this spectrum and what do we need to do?
Absolutely. So, how do we get Vinita to be prime minister? How does that happen?
Oh, no.
How do we make that happen?
There's a good reason why she's not.
Yeah, we do need a woman leader.
So, Vinita, we talk so much about women's empowerment in India, yet something like marital rape is not even recognized legally. So, how can we talk about women's empowerment when we are behind in so many ways?
Amy, marital rape is only one issue, and I think it's a significant issue. But look at everything else. The number of dowry deaths, the husband's family demanding dowry from, the girl's family. And if the girl's family is not able to give that, you can kill her, you can hang her, you can do this whole issue of, I as a woman, in so many cases, don't even get to decide who my parents are marrying me off to. How come when the legal age of marriage is 18, about 1/3 of marriages in India take place before the legal age? One of the reasons for high maternal mortality in India is that by the time women are, 17 or 18, when their own bodies have not fully developed, they've had multiple pregnancies. So if you look at maternal mortality, it's higher the younger you are. So there are so many issues with respect to women. I mean, look at how, two kids, a boy and a girl, are brought up in the same household. The boy can do everything, but the girl has to come home by 7 o'clock in the evening before it gets dark, and so on and so forth. So we have fostered a society that thinks it is fine to not be equal when it comes to, rules, regulations, etc., etc. I'll give you a real life example. I was a keynote speaker at one very well-known university in India that had had some issue with, you know, boys molesting girls on the campus. And the principal of this college very proudly said to me, and you know what? For the protection of our women, we've said after 8 o'clock, the women should not move out of their dorms. So I turned around and I said to him, Sir, what if you flipped it and said after 8 o'clock, the boys are not outside so that the women are free? The point is, the thought had not even occurred to him. So our minds are so colonized, they are so misogynistic that, what you've picked up is just one sliver of a string of data points that I can share with you, which say that it's not equal. The number of young girls who are killed for family honor, just because I am dating somebody who's not from my caste. What about the chap who's dating me? What about his family honor? That we don't think about. The family honor, the huge burden of responsibility, somehow is on the shoulders of women. So it is extremely unequal. And, I've thought about this so often, and I really think if India had more what I call dangal dads from the film Dangal, dads who stood up for their daughters, dads who gave their daughters, the courage, the conviction to be themselves, this would be a very different society. We need Renaissance men and we need dangal dads.
What a great film, firstly. And I really agree with you that that point that you mentioned about women not going out at 8 p.m., I think this really hits the nail on the head because for me, the issue is the objectifier. It's not the objectified. But the problem is that that is how because then where do you draw the line with this? Because I was talking to someone recently and they were like, if girls didn't wear such short skirts and things, men will always comment on the women that the women shouldn't wear revealing clothes and stuff because then it's inducing lust in men, or men will be men. But my question is, why is it that the women have to pander to the men's inability to respect them? Right? Because then where do you draw the line with that? It's highly subjective. For example, I've seen cases where there was a woman wearing a burqa. She was walking down the street and the man came up to her and he physically touched her in a very inappropriate way and drove off. Now I'm like, do you then then TK, she's completely covered. Now what? Now put her in the room and keep her hidden away in a house because the man was unable to hold himself back? We can't keep putting the burden, as Vinita said, on women. Men have to be educated to respect women and understand that they can't treat women this way. They can't objectify them. They can't do whatever they want. And I think that just comes down to how we educate men and women from an early age, perhaps.
Absolutely. What is taught in school, what is taught in home, what society prioritizes, what society respects, all of those. And it's over a period of time. And also, when there has been inappropriate behavior, how long it takes just to get any justice. When we've got so many instances and so many cases, of women being raped, the perpetrators are right there. There is CCTV footage. It all gets into, high sort of media attention for a period of time, and then it goes away. Nirbhaya and the reforms that happened after that would not have happened if civil society had not taken it upon themselves to say that this is unacceptable. But then we have the whole Justice Verma Commission report. We've got guidelines there on what needs to be done, what needs to happen, the fact that police stations have to have a female police officer, etc., etc. Now, unless those are followed, it just falls by the wayside.
Again, a very complex, multi-layered issue across the board. But I think ultimately it all comes back down to education. The more educated men and women are, I feel, from an early age, we see a very different result in adulthood. And as you're saying, it starts in the households, it starts in the schools. But I mean, I've certainly seen it from my end that my friends who have grown up in a very traditional, unfortunately patriarchal household do grow up, and it's not like they're bad people or anything like that. It's just an underlying thought process about men's position in society and women's position in society. And then we have this like underlying thing.
The only thing I would say there, and this is not to, overlook or in any way reduce what we have to do here. It's an issue in India, but it's also an issue in so many other parts of the world. It's a global issue. Some societies are more equal than others, but there is um, what we're going through right now with Epstein and all of that saga.
So, Australia has a population of about 25 million people. Domestic abuse and rape cases are at the same level in Australia that they are in India, comparatively with our population differences. And it's interesting because when you think of a Western country like Australia, the last thing you would think is that domestic abuse and rape are such prominent issues. Also in India, 1 in 3 people is a pedophile. And so I'm like shocked about how So when we talk about education, for example, Australia is an educated country, yet we're having these issues. So whilst I'm also saying ki haan, education will solve it, no, it's something deeper than that.
You know, putting it slightly, lighthearted, but it does make the point. I think it was either Mark Twain or I think Mark Twain who said, I've never let schooling interfere with my education.
I love this. It's so
So,
true.
what we are saying about education is not right. Just because I have been to school does not make me educated. I can name you so many people we all would know who have not had a formal education, but they are wise. They have a sense of integrity. They have a sense of right and wrong. They have a sense of authenticity. Um, and this really has to do with values. This has to do with, how do you bring up little children to say that you've got to respect other people, whether they are white or black, whether they speak in this accent or that accent, whether they are male or female, whether they are children or adults. I think that's the education we have to give.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I think when I say education, I mean critical thinking.
Yeah.
And that's not something that schools have taught anybody. In fact, it's probably taken it away, to be honest. But there's an organization in Australia called Values Education or something. So they come into schools and they have like a whole curriculum where they teach students critical thinking, empathy, compassion, and all of these things across the board in relation to the environment, to humans, to animals. And I was so impressed by this because I'm like, this is what schools should have as part of their curriculum. Life skills, caring about the environment, doing like things around the home, learning. Like when I left school, I did not know how to open a bank, like how to open a bank account or have any financial knowledge. फालतू के लिए हमें calculus सिखा दिया, and then what am I meant to do? I'm a right brain person. What am I going to do with calculus? I want to know, where should I invest $100? What should I do? But these practical skills, these empathy, these things are so lacking. So I really agree with you that I think that's what needs to be. I think Montessori schooling has elements of this. Certainly I went to a Montessori school and they would have me doing weeding, unka sab kaam humse hi karate the, but it was good because you learn life skills and it's nice. So Smita, I was reading online that over 50% of the Indian population is women, over 50%, yet over 19% make the labor workforce in India. So I see that this is a really big disparity, and I was hoping that you can shed some light on why that's the case and what can we do about it as well.
I think the first thing is to acknowledge women as contributors to the economy, right? Like Vinita was talking about it earlier. Most of the farm labor is actually women, but we don't really acknowledge them as people who are actually contributing to the economy. The same thing happens when you look at entrepreneurship in rural areas. Most of these households, because the men have either migrated or they're alcoholic, they're not contributing to the household. It's the women, in addition to the household work that they do, they've taken up self-employment opportunities. They're trying to make ends meet, trying to send their daughters to school, and the entire responsibility is actually on them, but they go completely unacknowledged. So many villages, like in Uttarakhand, in many of these areas, you see that the men are missing. Either some of them are sending back money home, some of them are not even doing that, they've disappeared. So it's just left with women to take care of everything. And what we have also seen is once the woman is entrusted with the responsibility, then you can just see what they're actually able to do. For example, loans that we have given out as part of our work at Rangde, they've been transformational. They've actually helped women not just look at themselves as people who are doing something for their livelihood. About 40% of the women have now actually moved on to become job creators. So they're just not employing themselves. Initially, it starts that way, that I need to take care of my family. But then once they get access to opportunities, they get access to mentorship, they understand what it means to run, an entrepreneurial venture, then they actually become job creators. But it's about acknowledging it, because most of this is actually informal. It's never recorded anywhere. It's never, added to the data. So that is where, I feel is the missing bit. But I do see a big change. I feel there's like a silent revolution in rural India, but we need to reach that tipping point for it to make an impact, right? And all of these ripples that we are seeing will actually add to that. What they need is access to dignified finance, access to opportunities, just like me and you have it. And we don't need to fight for it every single day. And with whatever limited means, the kind of movements that women are actually creating at grassroots, I'm very, very hopeful that, things will change. What we really need to see is, all these well meaning policies that are there. They're like, they sound really great on paper, but how do we actually ensure implementation is great, right? There are so many government schemes that are not even being put to good use because people down there who are responsible for implementing it are corrupt. So people don't even get those resources, right? So organizations like ours can only bridge the gap, but we can't replace the government, right? So what we need to do is ensure that every single woman's contribution actually counts. And how can we do that? By helping them get on to the formal economy. So that is where, things would really, really matter. And yeah, like I said, I'm very hopeful that all these efforts will add up one day to see the tipping point.
Absolutely. I can only imagine how difficult it would be for women, especially from rural India. Like I'm an educated woman, and I struggle when I go to the bank to get anything done. Like I have to be there for hours, and it's like so much jugaad I have to do and jump through so many hoops. But imagine a woman who is not educated, who may not be able to speak properly or read or something like that, right? I can only imagine the difficulties that they would be facing. So, yeah, I feel positive as well, especially the work that you guys are doing, creating these opportunities that these people would never have had otherwise. So I think that that's really amazing that you're bridging that gap. So that's awesome. So guys, where do you see, this is a very broad question, a very crazy question, where do you see India in the next 20 years?
Well, I guess it's easier to answer where I would like to see India in the next 20 years.
So there could be a realist answer and there could be an idealist answer, maybe.
No, I think in a sense the two are interconnected because, where we will land up in the next 20 years will really be a function of the choices we make today, the priorities we assign to what is required. We talked earlier about, and these are very basic things that we are talking about. We are talking about access to education, access to healthcare. For the longest time, we've been hearing it's roti, kapda, makan. If I look at India today, we're still struggling with roti. We talked about 800 million people still relying on free cereals through the PDS scheme to keep themselves from being hungry. So we have a long road to travel in the roti kapda makan scenario. Then we've got to ensure other things like, environmental sustainability. What we do with the choices we make on how we're going to sort of live our lives. And let me give you an example of Bangalore. 60 years ago, Bangalore had 200 lakes. Today, those have been reduced to, I think, 52. Okay, the lakes were not just beautiful places to go for a walk. The lakes were a fairly well thought out, managed system of how to regulate water flows and things like that. So I think where we will be in 20 years will depend on what we choose to prioritize, what our road to sustainability is going to be, what our road to equality of opportunity, as we talked about earlier. What are going to be the social criteria through which we move ahead on the path of development, not just economic growth, which is skewed towards the rich and the wealthy. What we do with education, what are the values that we put in place for how things are going to happen, access to healthcare. And of course, we've got a great strength in terms of our skill and knowledge base when it comes to a few industries, but we have to gain that competitive advantage. How are we going to rely on technology to take us forward? Not technology with our eyes closed, but technology which is endemic to what is required in India. The use of technology in agriculture, the use of technology in, creating public transport systems and so on. So I think it's a little bit of it depends, but honestly, where we are in 20 years is a function of what we decide to do now, what we decide to do, next year and the following year, and the staying power with which we do these things. It can't be come to India, manufacture in India, and then if nothing happens, that's okay. If we have to create jobs, we have to think about those avenues and areas that can employ a lot of people. On the one hand, we're talking about AI. On the other hand, we're talking about, 20 million graduates every year, and they have to be given employment. And, how many more apps can we have for grocery deliveries? So it is really a question of sitting back and saying, what are the priorities? Where are we going to invest? What do we, what is mission critical and what is nice to do?
Absolutely. I think you're right that there needs to be taking a step back and just looking at the priorities, right? From what I see, I feel like the priorities are skewed to, as you said, the rich, and or with an economic focus rather than where the focus could be leaning towards, which is the people.
Yeah. And that economic focus also, I mean, you look at the reality of India. The top 1% of India owns 40% of the wealth of India. The bottom 50% owns only 6% of the wealth of India. If you look at income, the top 1% accounts for 22% of India's income. And the bottom 50% is hardly about 14%. So we are in a very skewed economy. So you can't look at averages in India for anything because, as they say, right on average, but wrong on every other data point. So, that doesn't give you the true picture of true India. So for India to move forward, I think we have what should I say, the ichha. We have the desire. We'd like to be up there. But in order to go up there requires a lot of determination, a lot of focus, investments in the right place, a lot of hard work. So China didn't get to where it is just sort of sitting back and relaxing, or any other country for that matter. I mean, if I were to use the analogy of a sports person, I can't be the number one tennis player and not practice and say, okay, I'll just go and play a match and somehow I'll win. That's never going to happen. So, it requires consistency, it requires collaboration, it requires consensus building, it requires the wisdom to navigate a world that is getting increasingly complex and complicated. It requires a big heart. It requires compassion. It requires empathy. And I can understand all of these qualities one person cannot have, but you can have a group of people that respect each other, that bring together these qualities because they have a shared objective, a shared drive, a shared passion, a shared conviction that only by doing this can we move forward.
Absolutely. What about you, Smita? Where do you see India in the next 20 years?
I feel that a lot actually depends on what we as individuals dream of for India and what are we actually willing to do to make that dream a reality, right? Because unless, we care about it, like we spoke about so many issues, and, we also spoke about as an individual, do I care about it? Or do I feel that can I do something, to influence change? A lot of times I feel that we end up not doing anything because we don't have that dream, for the country on what do we want this country to look like and what are we doing about it. So I do feel that if a lot of people care about where we are heading as a country, ask the right questions to the right people, bring in accountability, a lot of things will change. It's just because we are in our own comfort zones and we feel that, yeah, everything is fine because my life is going on okay. I'm not even able to imagine what will happen 20 years from now because nothing happened in the last 20 years, right? We made a lot of leaps on some fronts, but then I still read articles about how people in Bihar are exploited. They're paying 100% interest rates on their loans. And these are like poor tribal communities. And then you wonder what's going to happen in the next 20 years. Unless we change what we did in the last 20 years, and we do something extraordinary, I don't think a lot would actually change. While I have that dream, I do see that, it needs a collective effort from all of us. And it's not just the government, right? We always say, the government should do this, while scale and large scale systemic change can happen from there. But what are we doing about it? So I don't have an answer, but I do have a question on how long it would take for us to get there. And do we have that shared dream, as people in this society? I do hope things would change.
I feel I'm a little bit more pessimistic than you are. I feel that most people just don't care. And I think this is purely from what I have seen, is that people just think about their immediate needs being met and don't have that foresight, even for their children, don't have that foresight for the next 20 years, 30 years. So they don't care about their impact on the environment. They don't care about what's happening in their wider community. So I feel that, and I think that's just the human condition to be selfish and not care. But there are always exceptions to that. Like there are people such as yourselves who do care about things beyond themselves. And so I think that that group of people is what's going to be the beacon of light in this country. That's
Actually, if I may, Amy, I want to pick up on something that you said and what Smita said. I think both are relevant. I think Smita's point about what is the individual responsibility I take is a very important and very critical one. And I'm increasingly seeing, I interact with students, and there are all kinds of students at all points in time. But there are people who are beginning to raise questions and care about the environment. If I'm 22 years old today, what do I have to look forward to? If I'm, just come from a ordinary middle class family, and education is my way out, and where are the jobs and what do I do and so on. So there is an individual component to what you said, that most people don't care. I'm not sure. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that. You take the number of NGOs we have in India. I think there are 2 million registered NGOs, right? These are all, mostly all, coming from a place of, I see injustice, I want to do something about it. I don't see access to healthcare here, therefore, what can I do to improve healthcare? I don't see access to education here, so what can I do to improve education? So there are, but their voices are drowned in a much bigger noise suddenly of valuations and who's a billionaire and wealth increases, and what do we consider as important. There are magazines that publish lists of billionaires. I wish there would be magazines that published lists of people who changed one life at a time. And if we began to respect, there are some forums that recognize that. I'm not denying that. There are some national awards that recognize that as well, but not enough. We are always reading about, the people who made the money, the unicorns. We don't read about all those people who put in all that hard work and the company didn't succeed, or the venture didn't succeed, or something went awry. So, we can't live in Disneyland all the time and we can't be morose all the time. I think the reality is somewhere in between. We have to have enough pulls and pushes to demand, but also to deliver. As a citizen, am I doing what I need to do? Do I think twice about taking a lot of plastic and throwing it everywhere? Do I even do basic things like segregate garbage so that it doesn't go into a landfill?
Yeah. If I were a 25-year-old Indian citizen,
I'm
okay,
so glad I'm not.
I'm somewhere in my 30s, but let's say I was a 25-year-old Indian citizen and I am just completing my degree. Do I look forward to the next 30, 40 years of my life in India when it comes to how would the environmental factors be looking on a very serious level for me and my family moving forward? What would it be like in terms of trying to enter the employment landscape in India? And is it worthwhile for me to even stay in India? Or should I be looking at leaving and going overseas, which is what a lot of people are striving for, right? The amount of people that I meet that are getting an education in India in order to just get out of India as being the goal, that's seen as the thing to aim for. But then shouldn't we be trying to stay here and make India great and trying to live a great life within India itself?
Like with everything about India, this is true and the opposite is also true. So, there isn't one stereotype of a 25-year-old. It depends on, am I a 25-year-old from an affluent background? Do my parents live in the village? Does my father have debt? What is my mother doing? Am I a professional and I can get a job if I'm a doctor in a hospital? So, a lot of it really has to do with your own condition. And depending on that condition, you can either feel great about the opportunities in India, or you can say, you know what, I don't see great opportunities for somebody like myself. And therefore, let me do the best that I can. But even that choice is a choice of the relatively more privileged.
So, what about someone from a middle class family, right? What does it look like for them? Not from an affluent family, from a very middle class family.
I've seen, and again, I don't want to generalize, but I think, middle class families that have educated their children, I think those people are looking to make a life for themselves. So if there is a job in Ireland, they will go to Ireland. If there is a job in Australia, they will go to Australia. If there is, so I'll give you, real life stories are actually more interesting than. So I was in New York, and invariably, the gentleman who was driving me in the car to the hotel was of Indian origin, and I got chatting with him. He's from Haryana, and he told me that he is engaged to this lady who is also Indian but lives in Italy. So I said, what is she doing in Italy? So he said that, her brother migrated there many years ago. So he called the sister, he called the brother. So that whole family is living in Italy. And then I said, do you have other people in your family? So he said, yes, I have a brother. And I said, where is your brother? And the brother is in Austria. And he is working for a motor car company in the factory. And this is this one family from Haryana. As I said, anecdotal. But, you know, I think there are people who will pursue opportunities and work really hard where they feel they can make a better life and living for themselves and their families.
Hmm. It's like karna hai to karna hai type thing. I love that.
Yeah, that's the story of migrants.
Absolutely. So then what about, let's say, for example, my friends who come from overseas, okay, they're always very shocked when they are in the car in Mumbai and a beggar might come up to them and be, knocking on the window. What about, what does a realistic future look like for someone that is begging at the window in India if they have the will to get out of that cycle of what they're doing? Like, in all seriousness, what opportunities can they ever have?
Smita probably has a lot of examples from the women you give loans to and their children. So I will let her, but I'll share with you two or three examples known to me.
A lot of our experiences have been more in the rural areas where you know despair has actually turned into grit and determination just because of some of the opportunities that were provided and some initial push that was given to women. For example, a group of women that we were working with in Rajasthan, there was a huge challenge of alcoholism in that particular village, and it was
The women
an
or the men?
no, in the village, and the men would you know usually get drunk, and
Men are always the
yeah,
problem in any scenario. Yeah.
absolutely. And and there was also a problem of illegal liquor, spurious liquor, which is what was also affecting the health of the families. So to such an extent that not just the fact that men were turning alcoholic, but it had massive health issues on them. And women who were actually not educated went all the way to fighting with the district administration, making their voices heard to ban, spurious liquor from their village. The reason I'm giving this example is where there is that little bit of spark, where there is a little bit of willingness on the people's part to change, a lot can actually happen. But if that intent or will to change does not exist, I do feel that it's very difficult to bring about change for anyone. And like the example of begging that you gave, it's a very complex problem. It In some cases it's a very organized system where somebody else is actually living on the you know whatever they are earning as beggars. Somebody else is actually living on those on the money that is earned there. So how do we actually, anything that you see in India has a lot of layers to it, and it's a very very complex issue. So I would say that if somebody wants to change, I'm sure there are enough resources, enough opportunities out there, but that little bit of spark needs to come from that person, that that change has to happen. That's what I think. But I've seen lots of those changes in really extraordinary circumstances where anyone would have very easily given up, to see how they've come out of that to become very successful now in solving that problem or becoming entrepreneurs, or taking their ventures to the next level. So that's happened in very extraordinary circumstances.
Possible if they have the human spirit and the grit.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
But there are also other structures in place. So, for example, there are a large number of NGOs that work in the development sector, right from primary school education to tertiary education and so on. And all of them are doing incredible work. Juxtapose that with something that I've seen, which is a very strong trend in India, and it applies to women, whether they are in urban India or rural India. Most women are quite clear that, if possible, they would not like their daughters to lead the life that they have led. And they see education as a way out of that. So there is a very well-known organization that has been supporting the education of women for over 30 years now. And recently, they've started giving STEM scholarships. And they had a function here, and 146 scholarships were given to women to pursue educational degrees in science and technology and engineering and math. Out of 146, about 110 were daughters of farmers. There were another 12 who were being brought up by single mothers. There were another 8 or 9 whose parents were daily wage earners. And then there was an assortment. But you look at them and you see their determination. And you look at the track record of what these girls have done. Once they've got this education, they end up in very good jobs, in IT companies or in other companies. And that is going to be the big game changer. That's why, coming back to what we said, we've got to create more jobs, because I think we've got young people, especially girls, willing to work hard, willing to do what it takes. And if there is a job at the end of it all, that makes for it.
And we've also seen, you would have read lots of stories where, the daughter of a pani puri vendor or a daughter of an auto rickshaw driver actually, cleared a UPSC exam. You see a lot of those stories. You also see, graduates who have, studied really well, who didn't get a job, ended up, somebody who is running a pani puri stall now and is really doing a good job at it, right? So I see this sort of a dichotomy where there's like one side where there's unemployment, and there's an entirely different side where people are trying to make everything possible for them to live their dream. So it's a very diverse country.
So, Smita, if I had 1 crore to invest, which if someone wants to donate 1 crore to me, please feel free, should I be investing it into stocks or should I be doing a social investment? And can you please explain what is the difference between the two and what does social investment even mean?
Sure. So if you're investing in stocks, then you're investing in markets,
Yeah.
right? If you're doing a social investment, you're actually investing in a fellow Indian. And that's the big difference. You're actually investing in an individual for whom the markets have failed, right? And the markets have failed to deliver. And that is where, there's a need for social investing. uh, there are many instances, many times when people ask us, why don't I get market returns on Rangde, right? And we always tell them that if you want market returns, then you should invest in stocks, right? I would encourage everyone to actually invest a part of their portfolio, and this is completely their choice what percentage of their portfolio, like, they want to invest in social investing. But give a fellow Indian a chance, because it's not a handout. What happens in social investing is you're actually investing in somebody's venture, somebody you have never seen or met, but then, whose background and whose credentials have actually been verified by Rangde, and you can invest in their business and you actually get repaid. But what is stopping us from doing this is all the biases that we have, the stereotypes. Sitting here, how can I trust this farmer in Jharkhand
पैसा लेके भाग
to
जाएगा.
repay my loan? Oh,
Yeah.
you know what? always give a loan to my domestic help, but she never repays. So, how can I actually trust this farmer to repay? So, it's those biases that actually come in. And that's why I said, create a small portfolio and then let social investing surprise you. Because many times your social investing portfolio may end up doing a lot better than your normal investments in the market.
What type of returns would you be looking at with social investing in comparison to, obviously, there's a lot of variances here, but what type of return would you be looking at with social investing?
So if you're talking about returns from a financial return perspective, then you get about 8% returns on a social investment on Rangde. But what it does do is give you that satisfaction of enabling another individual without a handout or charity. And that is something that you can never get from any other investment that you would do in the market.
Absolutely. What about the risks involved though? Like, is it substantially riskier for me to do a social investment rather than a stock?
Okay, I may be biased, but data on Rangde shows that out of close to the 100 crores that we would have disbursed, about 0.37% is what has been written off. So which means that there's a very, very high probability, while as a platform I cannot guarantee that the money will come back. But it's just, what we have seen is people in rural India are way too sincere, and there is, unless something drastic happens in their lives, they'll do everything possible to repay your loan and the trust that you have actually put in them. And that's our experience in the last 17 years.
Wow, that's amazing. And I feel like, I think you're right that there's a lot of biases involved with this. I'm not like an avid investor or anything, but I have invested some money in stocks, okay? And I've lost quite a bit of money in stocks as well. So it's one of those things that, when people talk about risk, I'm like, I feel like there's risks with any type of investment. You need to look at it holistically and be like, yes, you have to look at it financially, that what type of returns would I be looking at, but also be looking at what is the other outcomes with this investment. What I like about the social investing model is it's not just about the money, it's about that you are using your money for a good outcome as well, and you're helping people, which is so cool that you can do that. And it's not just a donation, like you are getting a return. So I think that that's amazing.
Absolutely. And to think that about 70 to 80% of individuals we fund are people who had no credit scores
Wow.
when they didn't borrow on Rangde. And after having borrowed, now they have a formal credit score that is recognized by banks and all financial institutions, which means that you're not just giving them a loan, but you're unlocking choice for them. They were choiceless until now because nobody considered them credit worthy. But once they've received that loan and they've repaid it, everybody recognizes them. They've actually built their credit worthiness, and that is what you're enabling, which is, not make them dependent on Rangde anymore, because they can borrow from, anywhere where they feel they're getting loans on good terms.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So, Vinita, you have invested in Rangde as a social investor. Can you please explain to me how you feel about it and why you're passionate about social investing?
Oh, I feel great, and I think Smita elaborated it very well. It's, you know, you have to operate with some conviction. And the conviction in this case is that if these very well deserving people could have access to money, then they could improve their own lives and those that are dependent on them. And to my mind, it is frankly, I mean, I didn't consider risk or anything because I just believed in the concept. And sometimes you have to operate from belief, not necessarily from numbers and this and that. You know, it's no different from what people are doing when I put money into a VC or into a private equity fund. It's exactly the same, except that, you'll have somebody coming from an IIM or an IIT with a PowerPoint presentation, dazzling you with, plans and so on and so forth. And these people have just very straightforward requirements and needs and what is to be done. And I believe that if more and more people could really support individuals that are positively impacted by impact investing, then they in turn, create a whole ecosystem around themselves, which actually adds to, GDP growth.
Mm, absolutely. And it's amazing that so I put in a small amount on Rangde because I wanted to understand how does it work, like because it felt a little scary for the first time doing it, to be honest. And I was so amazed that I was able to see that my money it's going to two people right now. And I'm able to see their pictures, and I'm able to see what work they're doing, and how much I've not donated, invested in them. And being able to see, very, like, it's all very transparent, that I know that this is how much I've given, this is how much I can expect back, and I know that I'm contributing to their livelihoods and their goals in life. And that's so amazing that you can use your money for that, rather than it just lying in the bank, or investing in some other stock or whatever. So I think that's really incredible. But if someone, Smita, I know I asked you that if someone has 1 crore to invest, what if someone just has like 10,000 rupees to invest?
Oh, you can start with 500 rupees on Rang Day. And the reason why we did, it's a non-thinking amount is, again, for the huge trust deficit that exists in India, right? Like you just mentioned, when you saw the platform, it was scary. Like, will I get my money back? Is this even legit? Despite everything that we have on the platform, these questions, come up because you don't really trust something like Rang Day that easily, right? When you come across this concept for the first time, and that's why it's 500. So for some people, 500 is a non-thinking amount. For some people, it could be 1 crore. But what we encourage people to do is just give it a go with 500 or 1,000. Get started. And what we have seen is, when the first repayment actually comes back into your account, that's when you realize, oh wow, this farmer actually repaid my money. And that is when, the bias that was there earlier kind of starts to disappear. You trust the platform more, you trust individuals a lot more, and then, you continue to invest more. That's what has happened with every single person who's invested on Runway.
That's amazing. Well, hopefully more people learn about this and, want to back more of rural India and back Indians, and get on board with social investing. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for joining me today. I feel like we could go on and on with more and more topics, but we do need to wrap it up today. So thank you so much for your time. It's been an amazing conversation.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Great
Amy.
speaking with you too.
Thanks.